Hello and welcome to Rightwing Nation. Now, we have quite a few stories to get into. Now, if you haven't seen the previous episode, if you're not sure how this format works, then we do have previous episodes for you to discuss. This is the 4th episode. So, yeah, we are just going to get into all of the stories, starting with what's happening in New Zealand. Now, the first story happening in New Zealand that we are going to discuss will be, apparently, there will be quarantine camps for people who test positive for COVID, and apparently they will be forcibly held there. From what Stuff reports, and if I remember it correctly, I'll have the words right here, so if I'm wrong, you can read and see the accurate numbers in case I get them wrong. But according to Stuff, which is of course a highly credible news source that I would trust with all sorts of information, apparently there are 32 managed isolation and quarantine facilities in the country, and they have a capacity of 6,260 people. Now, what I find interesting about this, well, there are a few things about it, but one, apparently according to this article, there have been 25 coronavirus deaths. Now, I'm not too sure where this article got that number, because I haven't heard it. I mean, I know the Ministry of Health website has a bit of inaccuracies when it comes to reporting, and if you want to know what I mean by that, check out this video right here where I explain that. But, 25 deaths? I guess I could believe it, but I just have to see where it's, what the study or source they're saying for that. So, yes. But another thing I find interesting is, because this has, let's look through the lenses of COVID-19, and even if let's buy into it being a nationwide pandemic, even though the numbers do not showcase that, as I have mentioned in that video, although it's probably higher now. It's definitely higher now with Omicron. But let's look at this logistically, which I know a lot of people aren't interested in, logistics and that. It's a bit of a snooze fest for a lot of people. Personally, this is more sort of my thing, but bear with me, it will be brief. So, New Zealand has a population of 5 million people, as we all know, the team of 5 million, which is totally a team, definitely. But, yes, so 5 million people. 32 managed isolation or quarantine facilities, and the max capacity of all of them is 6,260. Now, that is not even, I don't even think that's even a tenth of the New Zealand population. So if this was truly, if the New Zealand government did truly take this seriously, why haven't they put more money into making more managed isolation and quarantine facilities? Because if this truly is a pandemic that we all have to be afraid of, shouldn't they be taking it a bit more seriously, trying to put more money into the medical department? And I don't just mean Pfizer's pockets, I mean actual, quarantine facilities and managed isolations. Because they're always talking about how their hospitals are overrun. Partially could be because of the vaccine mandate. Now they're understaffed. Although I don't know, I haven't read the statistics on that. But, yeah. It might be because the New Zealand government, they say they take it seriously, but their actions say something else. It's like, oh yeah, here's this small amount. Which is pretty interesting because they've been putting in millions of dollars have been just thrown around. I wonder where it's going. But I think the worst part about these quarantine camps is that the people being held there are being held against their will. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, I don't know, that sounds a bit out of it. I don't know, would New Zealand do something like that? Would Jacinda do that? Well, here's Jacinda Ardern herself saying that that's her plan.
The American left and their media poodles have long held up New Zealand as the model for how to properly deal with a lot of things, including COVID. But anyone who loves freedom should take note, because the Kiwis have a terrifying new response to rising COVID case numbers. They're throwing people into quarantine camps.
If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test.
And apparently, despite the fact that it is nearing capacity, apparently these men's facilities, if you are an international, or like someone from another country, and you want to come to New Zealand, you will have to have proof that you have a reservation to one of these quarantine camps. Now, if you ask me, this is rather dystopian. I mean, we are forcibly holding people in quarantine camps until they test negative for a virus that isn't even... How am I going to put this? For a virus that is over-dramatized, shall we say. Now, again, I do recommend you checking out this video because that's where I break down sort of the numbers about it. Now, of course, those numbers will have changed since I did this a few months ago, but if you saw that video, you've seen that there have only... Okay, I'll put up the numbers here. Now, I haven't looked at them recently, and I'm sure they've gone up quite a bit, but just as you're looking at these numbers of the COVID-19 cases, as you're looking at them, I'll just remind you of a few things that I established in the previous video I did discussing the numbers. Keep in mind that a majority of the cases have recovered. Again, I haven't looked at the numbers in a few months, but this is what I've established previously. A majority of the cases have recovered. There have only been a handful of recorded COVID deaths. And even the website officially states that those are people who had COVID at the time of their death, not people who died because of COVID-19. That is in the website. Unless they changed it. Now, that first story is pretty horrifying. Here's something that's not as horrifying, but honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about it because I don't know much about the science about it, but apparently thermal imaging could be used to, like, in the future, fight against COVID. Like, people could use thermal scanners, and if you have a high temperature, you might need to get tested. Now, I am no scientist. I've been homeschooled most of my life, so I may not be the best professional person to go to about this, but that seems like I don't think that's really a surefire way, because, like, what if someone had a fever? Would they have to get tested? That just seems like there could be too many loose ends with using thermal scanning. A care home in Christchurch is already implementing this technology, and there is even a manufacturer who is sort of trying to work on this. And how it will work is, if you have a high body temperature of, I think it's 37.5 degrees Celsius, I believe, you will have to go, they will ask you to have your temperature taken with a medical device. Now, I am no scientist, I'm no expert in, like, body temperature and that, but I feel like that's not the best sort of way to screen against COVID, because, like, what if the person just had a fever? You would have wasted a lot of money getting them tested and a lot of, like, time just because they had a fever or something like that. Now, I know some people may be asking, well, what about the room temperature? How are they going to account for that? Well, apparently, they are working with some, I don't know if they're engineers, but some people from the University of Canterbury, so they're trying to work on some technology to sort of keep the room temperature somewhat stable, I believe. They're working on that. And I do believe that this kind of does come from a good place or a good heart, because the person who mentioned at the residential care place, or I don't know if it's the same, I'm pretty sure it is, they said that they wanted to use this because that way they could scan people coming in, or like visitors, and they do realize that it is important, especially for people in residential care, to have visitors, because otherwise you could be creating loneliness and family issues. and that's a very noble sentiment. I don't know how like the science of thermal imaging and if they'll be accurate in like pinpointing COVID, but yeah, I'll honestly don't have much to say on this one. I'll leave this to like people who know more about this field to comment down below and discuss this. Now here's something that's going to be a point of celebration for many people. I am not one of them. Apparently, Jacinda Ardern is going into self-isolation after being confirmed as a close contact for a positive COVID-19 case. Now, apparently an associate professor did have some words or did comments on this situation, but if you know, the regular viewers of this channel, if you have seen previous episodes, you know that we don't take what associate professors have to say seriously. So I'm just not even going to comment on anything he says because he's an associate professor and, well, we don't acknowledge them as people who have interesting or important things to say. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Oh, well, why didn't she wear a mask? Well, she did wear a mask. I know what some other people are thinking. Oh, well, what about the booster? Wasn't she should have gotten her booster shot. Well, she did get her booster 5 days before the event, or the exposure event. But apparently, according to someone from the University of Otago, I just forgot. I don't know how to pronounce that, and I'm not going to try to. Apparently, the booster shot would not have had enough time to fully start working, which is why she got, well, she may be at risk. We don't know. I mean, maybe someone updated the story in between the time of me reading this article and it being recorded. But I haven't seen anything from it. I've just heard she's been in self-isolation. You know, when all the protests are happening. So I don't really know too much about the story because they're keeping it pretty under wraps. All we know is she is a close contact of someone who was tested positive, and she's in self-isolation. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of these big super spreader events, or like events where people, or places where people get COVID, they all require vaccination passports to enter. Just something to put out there. Just, a little something. Let's move on to the next segment before, the police come and raid my house with bazookas. Now on to America. Kind of. This is kind of worldwide news, but it's about an American company. It's Pfizer. Yep, our good old boys Pfizer. The rich boys themselves. They had some, the CEO had some words for people who spread misinformation. So if you've ever spread a piece of misinformation, if you've ever deliberately spread a piece of misinformation, well, then the CEO of Pfizer has words for you. Those words being that you are a criminal and you have cost millions of lives to all those deliberate people who deliberately circulate false information. You're a criminal. This coming from a company that had the largest criminal fine in, I believe, American history at that time. I believe it was $2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing. Apparently, according to a survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation, about a quarter or a third? I don't know, it's up here, so if I get anything wrong, just be sure to read it. 3/4 of US adults either believe or are unsure in at least one of 8 false statements about COVID-19 vaccines, with a majority of mainly unvaccinated adults and Republicans being the ones to have more concerns about the vaccines. But don't worry, there is hope. Hope. The CEO of Pfizer, your Lord and Master, he has decreed that life can go back to normal once the unvaccinated become the vaccinated. Why didn't you say so? Why didn't we think of this before? Now, a lot of people have said this, that life will go back to normal once everyone becomes vaccinated. Here's the problem with that, though. COVID-19, or the coronavirus, it's going to mutate. Now, I know a lot of people were surprised that there were all these different variants, like Delta, Omicron, Alpha, and then apparently there are others. but those are the main ones I know. And of course the SARS. Well, I think I keep forgetting. Is it SARS 20 or something like that? I don't know. I don't know if that's a variant or the original virus, but that's not really important for what I'm going with. But yes, viruses as a whole, they have a habit of mutating. Now, this could be due to a variety of different factors. I'm not too sure like the scientific angle, but like it could be new exposure to new elements or something, or just all these various little things. Viruses, they don't tend to just stay like stagnant. They often tend to mutate. And so, yes, we are always going to get variants, all these new variants, and we are going to constantly. We are constantly going to be getting new variants as COVID-19, as the coronavirus does mutate, as, you know, it would. It's I think a majority, I'm no scientist, but I think a majority of people who are scientists were not surprised that there were mutations, that it mutated, because that's just the way viruses work. They're not like these shadowy evil people who are like, oh, we're gonna get them. Oh wait, they have 2 meters. They're standing 2 meters apart. You know, we can't infect them. Oh, that guy, we're gonna infect that guy. Oh wait, shoot, no, damn, he's eating. I thought we had him. We got that we thought we had him because we got the mask off. But and from what I've heard, this might be false, but apparently the current like Pfizer vaccine isn't the best at dealing with Omicron. But now again, I'm not sure how true that is, but that is natural, because putting aside like a lot of the rhetoric about whether vaccines are effective or not, I mean, well, not that, but like whether of like anti-vax or pro-vax, this vaccine was made within a few months. Okay, maybe not a few months. It might have been quite a few months, but it didn't have like decades of testing and just like constant study and just all of the study that would be required to make this a fully effective vaccine that just protects your immune system. Because I'm not like, oh, vaccines, all vaccines are horrible, they're horrific. I'm not even anti Pfizer's vaccines. I'm just stating out that with the majority of previous vaccines, they have had years and sometimes even decades of testing, and that's why they work so well, is because they have had time. The people who made them have had time to work on them, so that way you are properly immunized by these vaccines. With a lot of these COVID vaccines, because of how recent COVID-19 is, there hasn't been a lot of long-term study opportunities, because I think it's been like 2 years since COVID was really a big thing. I'm pretty sure COVID would have been around since before then probably, but COVID mainly became like a worldwide phenomenon in 2020. As the coronavirus mutates and we get new variants, naturally it's going to be changing, and what may have worked in a previous vaccine won't have worked for a new variant. And so that's why a lot of this, you're just going to have to keep getting boosted, because the new variants are just going to keep showing up, because that's how viruses work, they mutate. And so you're just going to keep needing to get boosted and boosted and boosted. And so I don't think there's ever going to be an end for the whole, we need to get vaccinated because it's the best protection against COVID-19. Now, if you feel if you want to get vaccinated, go right ahead. That is your personal decision. But I don't think life's ever going to get back. If we are constantly pushing vaccine mandates and then we're going to be updating for booster shots to add to the vaccine mandates, I don't think life will ever get back to normal. Not until someone makes a genuine cure against coronavirus and all of its variants. But with the disease constantly mutating, the odds of that are less likely. I think I'm starting to lose my voice, so if my voice starting to get more cracked, sucks to be me. So let's discuss something we haven't talked about. Minneapolis. Yeah, I know this may seem weird, but I know a lot of people wondering, well, why are we discussing Minneapolis now? Well, Minneapolis voters have rejected a proposal that would have replaced the Minneapolis Police Department with a public health-oriented Department of Public Safety. Apparently the vote was 56% rejected the proposal. Now the group who voted yes to replacing the Minneapolis Police Department, they are widely seen as sort of representatives of the defund the police. Is it a movement, group, opinion? I don't know if it's really a group, because it seems to be just a bunch of miscellaneous people saying defund the police without any real leadership. So I wouldn't call that like a group or a movement, just a sort of hashtag. Now this defund the police hashtag gained a lot of traction and ground after the death of George Floyd in 2020, and a lot of people were backing them, and you even had a few politicians attending defund rallies. But then violent crime, like as supposedly steps were taken to actually defund the police, violent crime surged nationally, and especially in Minneapolis, which is why, and since then people kind of started backing away from the whole defund the police thing, like politicians and even left-wing groups who did support the hashtag originally, but now they're sort of... Now a representative of the Yes campaign has said that you can have a minimum number of police officers, and that this would best fit the needs of the people, and it would also lead to more safety. But then you've had people who are representatives from the No campaign. They have said that it just seems like there's not a lot of future thinking putting into it, like a lot of, okay, well, what happens after we do this? And apparently, because this article didn't mention it, but the person in the No campaign has said that, what would the public health safety department, I know it's not the correct name, but what would the department really do? What would law enforcement look like under this new department? Now, I'm sure a lot of people may have been surprised that Minneapolis voted no against replacing the police department, but I think something else. I think because of the riots that happened, they're a bit more hesitant to throw away the police. Now, what do I mean by this? Apparently, 1,025 properties were damaged during the riots, civil unrest, which unfolded after George Floyd's death. Now, these are not all of the buildings, these are merely the parcels, apparently. It's up here so you can see. That is a lot of destruction. Now, conveniently for our sake, a map was made of an area where some of the civil unrest took place, and it has all of the markers. Now, what the markers are is each of them represents a different kind of damage. I'll put it up here to show the really specific sort of what kind of damage was done, but basically yellow is more sort of cosmetic damage, orange is a bit more severe damage, but not too bad, and dark red is basically just destroyed. Now, apparently, according to Eric Hansen, who is the director of the Economic Policy and Development in the city of Minneapolis, I might have gotten a few words wrong, and I apologize if I have, but apparently he said that quite a few of the areas that were affected due to the civil unrest were areas that were already disaffected by economic downturn and something else, I believe. Good job. Hurting the poor and middle class people to stick it to the rich. Good job. Now, according to Steve Poore, who is a part of this department of Minneapolis. Again, sorry, I have a really bad memory and I'm starting to lose my voice, and so I apologize about that, guys. But he stated that apparently there were over a dozen buildings that were catastrophically damaged and needed to be torn down. But it wasn't just businesses that were affected by the damage, because apparently 35 households have been displaced from their homes due to the civil unrest and the damage that unfolded from it. Now I really understand why Minneapolis rejected to replace the police department, because if some sort of civil unrest happened like that in my city, I would not be in favor of replacing the police department. Now, not all cities are as kind to their police departments and willing to back them what I mean by that is New York kind of sucks. I mean, they did elect Andrew Cuomo, so that's not really much of a surprise. But why am I saying it sucks? Well, they apparently, because a lot of people, after the civil unrest that happened after the death of George Floyd, there are a lot of places, especially blue states, who are trying to do police reforms. And one of the places was New York. Why did I blank on that? That's weird. Anyway, New York. So they decided to do like a panel and try to come up with new ways to reform the police. Now, I know a lot of people were in favor of that. I know a lot of people won't be. But I think both sides can agree on this one thing. That the person that they got, one of the people that they got, was a cop killer. Apparently what happened was the cop killer, when he was 16, he and his, I think 4 other armed teenagers, they were robbing like a bar and grill, I think, something like that. And then an off-duty officer named, was it Robert Walsh? I believe so. If not, it's up here so you guys can probably know the name. He was off-duty, but he did try to stop them, and for that he got shot. And it wasn't just shot and then the kids ran away. The cop killer shot him, like, I don't know where if it was in the shoulder or something like that. And as he lay down helplessly, the cop killer then walked up to Walsh as he was lying down, like, because he was shot, and like laying down helplessly, pointed the gun to his head and shot him again. And now he's on a police reform panel. Naturally, people are angry. Like the cops, the police department isn't happy. The Walsh's family is not happy about it. Now, apparently the cop killer who was released from prison, I think in 2019, has been working with non-profit organizations to provide food and shelter for the homeless. That is good. I'm not knocking that. That is a good thing to do. I still don't think that he should be on a police reform panel. Now, apparently, this is part of a police reform initiative by our good old pal who always keeps his hands to himself, Andrew Cuomo. I was going to say Governor Andrew Cuomo, but I don't think he's the governor anymore. From what I heard, he's resigned. But, I mean, it's not going to matter if New York literally just gets someone who's just like him in. New York, do better. But anyway, Andrew Cuomo said that to all local governments that they needed to come up with a police reform plan, otherwise they wouldn't get federal funding. And he was so serious with it, he said period at the end. And as we all know, that is a very big sign of intelligence right there. Now let's talk about Germany. Yeah, let's do that. Apparently 70% of the population has been vaccinated, but apparently that's like one of the lowest forms or like vaccination rates in the Western Europe. Again, I'll take this article's word for it. And they are being called for even tougher restrictions, especially after like a family of 4 people or like 4 fully vaccinated individuals tested positive for Omicron. Now, what would these tougher restrictions look like? Well, apparently the idea of compulsory mandates for adults is being thrown around. Now, originally Chancellor Angela Merkel, that just sounds like a fascist dictator title, Chancellor, she was originally hesitant against the idea and said that she prefers education over coercion, but now she's changed her mind. And she's in favor of that and believes, but she's gonna leave Parliament to sort of vote for it. But she said if she was a member of Parliament, she'd vote for it. Now, I don't really feel like I have to say much about compulsory vaccine mandates. I've already made my stance clear. If you want to get vaccinated, then that is your right, your personal decision, and I respect that. But no one should be forced to take the vaccine. Hopefully the German parliament will push back and not make vaccines mandatory for all of Germany, but we'll see how that goes. Now, in case you're wondering why I've changed clothes and why all of a sudden the camera is at a weird angle, this is because I had to take a bit of a... I couldn't finish recording this episode on one day, so I'm gonna continue to finish this story in a reshoot. So yeah, let's just carry on. And now we get on to one of the more heavier subjects that we've approached today. Now, not everything has been fairly lighthearted, but let's go talk about the situation in Afghanistan. Now, for those of you who don't know the situation in Afghanistan, for years, the Taliban has been trying to take over that country, and America has been supplying weapons and training and all that kind of stuff to help the Afghanistan government, I believe, to defeat the Taliban. Until Biden decided to just pull out. And Kabul, I'm not sure how you say it, but it's on the screen. I think it's the capital city, something like that. Or I think it's the city where they have the... is it Prime Minister? Or... I'm not too sure what the leader... I'll have it on screen, the reason of its prominence, why that city is prominent. But with the fall of that city... yeah, Afghanistan has pretty much been taken over by the Taliban now. And now, especially, they now have access to all of the weapons that America has given or gave the Afghanistan military. Now, if you want more details, this article here really details what the Taliban got. It breaks down everything from military weapons, guns, and just everything. And I think night goggles and maybe, I don't know if they mention missiles or not. It'll be on the screen. But yeah, it really gives us a significant breakdown of what the Taliban actually got their hands on. The funniest thing is that the Taliban are considered insurgents, yet we hardly hear about the... I mean, after Joe Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan, we haven't heard much about it, but even to this day, we're still hearing about the insurgents on January 6th. Apparently, America is quite concerned about the fact that the Taliban's arsenal has now been boosted, so the idea of an airstrike has not been ruled out, but we'll see how that goes. Now, for those of you who may be a bit younger or unknowledgeable about the Taliban, might be wondering, okay, well, what will life be like now under the Taliban's control as opposed to what it was like before? Are there any current consequences of the Taliban taking control? Well, apparently they are taking girls they're going door to door and taking girls as young as 12 years old, and they are marrying them to their fighters as, I think it was like trophies, something like that. They are compiling, I think how it works is that they are compiling a list of women who are virgins, or maybe some of them aren't, or who don't have husbands, and then they are taking them and they are marrying them to their soldiers. And the girls as young as 12 on this list. The Taliban has already taken over 34 of the provincial capital cities. I don't know how to pronounce that word. And they have sieged many of the large cities in Afghanistan in a very quick assault, which has gotten the Afghanistan military a bit surprised. Probably because with American troops now getting pulled out, it's a lot easier, I imagine, because, well, America spends a lot of money on weapons and the military. So they kind of have an advantage in any sort of war. And in a majority of the Taliban-controlled areas, women have been barred from going to work, school, or leaving their homes without a permit, according to some activists. So yeah, the situation in Afghanistan is bad. It's so bad that there are people who will literally try to climb onto American planes as they try to fly off. And there's been footage of people falling to their deaths and just running along just on the airport, desperately trying to get onto the plane. I won't show you that footage, but if you want it, I will link the article in the description so you can watch the footage there. Apparently Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, something like that, he, after seeing all of this, or I don't know if he saw this footage, he said that the reason that this happened, that the Afghanistan fell, was because it lacked the will to fight. He went on to a quote saying that, well, okay, I'm not going to quote him exactly because I don't remember all the words he said, but what the gist of what he said was that despite the fact that America spent 20 years trying to supply them with weapons and training, what made them lose was the fact that they did not have the will to fight, or they did not want to fight for that country. Which is something I would imagine someone employed by Joe Biden would say. So what's happening in Afghanistan is truly horrific, and I know what you're wondering, well, what can we do to help? Well, I will link a few charities in the description who you could donate money to help support the cause. Now let's move on to the final story. The situation in Kazakhstan. Apparently, the government has been overthrown. The people have led a revolution. The president is, I don't know if he's arrested or he's fled the country. The prime minister's left the country. Several politicians are trying to flee the country. Police who aren't joining the people are being arrested. Doctors are being arrested. Vaccination centers are being destroyed. Politicians' houses are on fire. It's a very big situation in Kazakhstan. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Now, for those who are wondering why this has happened, apparently this is the result of a new system where, the government tried to implement a system where people unless they provided vaccine passports, could not draw money get their money from the bank, and apparently someone from the government, I think it was the president or prime minister, said that they would shoot to kill people who attempted to resist the government policies. And apparently in less than 24 hours, Kazakhstan fell. So anyway, guys, that is all I have for you today. I know that there was a lot of stories. There was a lot of really dark and a lot of really depressing stuff that's been happening around in the world. But I want you to remember to keep maintaining hope, because the moment that you lose hope, they win. So we have to just keep on doing what we got to do. We have to keep being positively peaceful. We have to keep standing up for our rights. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more content coming soon. Goodbye.